Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Quinten Krzysko, Samir Patel, Sonny Verma, and the one and only Luce, bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
And welcome back to another special playoff. I'll say that. My name is Quinten Krzysko. I am joined by Samir Patel and Brendan Sugrue. Gentlemen, starting with Samir, how are you doing this evening?
Couldn't be better, Q. Getting ready for playoff week and Packer week in the same week. Are you kidding me? This is an epic countdown here for us. I know the Bears are coming off a loss to the Lions, but honestly, that was probably the most inconsequential loss of the season. Literally nothing came out of that unless you want to talk about momentum into the playoffs. But I think this team's bigger than that. So not even worried about that Detroit game. Looking forward to this Green Bay game. And it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be interesting. These two teams, there's no love lost there. And they know each other pretty well. So can't wait.
Brendan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. Definitely a little bit nervous, a little bit excited. I would say I'm with Samir about the Lions game. It was tough. It was really tough to just get into and realize that Detroit was putting it on the Bears on both sides of the ball. But the fact that it was still a close game just shows the Bears' resolve. And look, I'm going to take that game in Week 18 and hopefully get those kinks out and maybe use it as a wake-up call going into the playoffs. I'd much rather them look like that versus what is hopefully going to happen this weekend and we get a Bears win. But, man, it's crazy that for as long and as historic as this rivalry is, this is only the third time that Bears and Packers are meeting in the playoffs. It's truly special, and it really does mean more, even just in a wild card game. I know it's not the NFC Championship like 15 years ago, but this is big, and I can't wait. Both previous matchups were so just nail biters right down to the very end, and I expect nothing less for this one coming up this weekend.
And we've got our friend Ron Luce in the comments saying, fired up. Week 18 is a thing of the past. Now it matters more. Playoff football, baby. And then SKS in the comments just saying, go Packers. You know, we don't love seeing that around here. I didn't realize that when I started to throw that up. We got another Go Packers in the chat. I'm not
profanity.
Appreciating that.
This is profanity is not allowed. You go home, Packers. That's what we want to say.
But gentlemen, so I want to start the show kind of talking through what the previous two games that we saw of this Bears Packers matchup. And Brendan, also you mentioned the player. It was one of you guys, Samir or Brendan, who mentioned the playoff aspect of it only happening, a few times ever. On our post game show, we looked it up. Someone in the comments was nice enough to look it up for us. Outside of the 2010 game, the only other time was 1944 when the Bears and Packers played in the playoffs. So this is truly a rare thing, but maybe something that's a little more common with the seventh playoff team being in there now. But all that being said, I want to talk a little about these first two games the Bears have had against the Packers, because largely, it's been kind of similar to what we saw against the Lions, where it was first half, what is going on? And then it took until late in the game for them to really kind of find any answers offensively. Is that something that, starting with Brendan, you think you're expecting coming into this game, or is that something? How do you think they fix that?
I don't know if you fix it this late in the season, Q. I've been saying it. We've all been saying it, but I definitely have come on here multiple times. And when we get to the keys to the game, I can't remember how many times I've said, start fast, stop starting slow, because early on in the season, you actually felt good about the script. The Bears offense was following it. And over the last few weeks, really since that first Packers game, because going back to Philly, they actually had a pretty good first half game plan. But ever since that Packers game, they just can't seem to get off to good starts. even against the Browns, they went 3-and-out that first series. Now I know it was the Browns and they were able to bounce back easily, but I just don't know if, I can't predict that it's going to happen at this point. I feel like this is one of those things where we're pretty much just going to have to live with the fact that whether it's a Ben Johnson issue, a Caleb Williams issue, a total offensive issue, whatever, it's just not going to get fixed yet. And we have to hope that the defense can keep the Bears in the game early until the offense finally finds its groove. I don't know if they need to install a dummy game script that they just run through in warmups and get it all out of their system. Because guys, I don't know if you heard, Ben Johnson said they had 6 mental errors in the first 11 plays on Sunday against the Lions. I know that's week 18. I know our friend Ron Luce said not to listen to that, but that's a huge problem this late in the game. And I just don't see it getting fixed against an opponent that defensively knows you very, very well.
Samir, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wish I had an answer for you, but Brendan's right. It's not limited to just the Packers matchup. We've seen this slow start. I mean, I know the Niners game was a shootout, but don't forget that first series also was a 3-and-out, and so they've been starting slow. They put up 2 goose eggs in first halves this season, which is kind of surprising considering they're like 4th in the NFL in scoring. So I don't know. I'd like to chalk it up to maybe the players kind of having a little bit of a letdown or a look ahead to be like, hey, we got this big playoff game. This game might not matter. Ben admitted it was a vanilla game plan. All that stuff that Ron talked about in the post-game show, some of that might be true, but this is a legitimate problem. And like Brendan said, I don't think it's one of those things that use a magic pill that you're going to, apply and it's going to be fixed this week. They're going to have to figure out a way to get creative. But, the second Packer game, even though they didn't score on that drive, that was still a good drive. They still moved the ball down the field. I would actually be okay with that outcome a second time, and just get the defense having belief that they're not just going to put them on the field again. So I think that we'll get to maybe some keys later, but that's obviously going to be, like Brendan said, a repeat moving along. One of the things I did find interesting when I was doing a little bit of research, and I'm sure you guys stumbled upon this as well, is the Packers and Bears' last wins are against each other. Mm-hmm. The Packers come in on a 4-game losing streak. The Bears coming in on a 2-game losing streak. They're both kind of coming in with not a lot of momentum, and their last win was against the other team. So I don't know if that's good, bad, or whatever it means, but it's, it means something because it's Bears Packers, I guess.
Yeah, and one thing that you got to this a little bit there, but even looking at the most recent one, right? The game at Soldier Field. Bears took the football first drive. They drove down 70 yards, and then it was just mental errors in that red zone. And that's truly that's the thing that I've talked about it. I talked about a little on the post game. I've talked about in the past. That's the part that scares me of Bears Packers. It's not the roster talent. It's not the coaching. And I feel like the Bears have the edge in coaching and narrowly. It's close with that. And roster talent, I feel like the Bears have a clear edge. But I'm just the mental aspect. I said to a coworker today who asked me about it, I pulled out the old Pedro Martinez Red Sox. It's the Bears are my daddy. They live rent free in my head, and the Packers are my daddy. They live rent free in my head, and I can't shake it. And I don't think the Bears have shaken it either, because when I look at that first drive, it's okay, they did everything right until they're in the red zone and they botch stuff. And that is what the fear that I live with right now going into this playoff game.
That's a really good point. And it's something that I've kind of been thinking about a little bit going back to that last Soldier Field game. Do you remember how much that both the Bears coaches and players were like, this is a big game. This is a massive game. It's a pseudo playoff game. We need Soldier Field rocking. We need you guys. And it was very they built it up to be bigger than it was. And I think in some aspects that worked a little bit, because the defense, they allowed a ton of yards, kind of like what they did against the Lions, but it was very bend but don't break. And you could tell they were fired up from the get-go. But I think that also could have hurt the offense early on too, because of those mental errors, making it bigger than it needed to be. I feel like there's a bit more of a tone shift this week, listening to the press conferences, listening to how Ben is getting everybody ready. There's just a different shift in how he's speaking. And it's basically, he doesn't need to say it's a big game. It's understood that it's a big game, but it's all about getting those details right and being as even keeled as possible to make sure you put your best foot forward on Saturday night. I just feel like that's sort of going to be the message. Like, we know it's the Packers. All of that, like the rivalry, the big games, that's understood. We don't need to buy into that anymore. What we need to do is play smart football, play our best brand of football, which has been, long sustained drives on offense, turnovers, key takeaway opportunities on defense, and just don't let the moment be bigger than it is. So Q, I think when you're talking about like living rent free in your head, I think that's kind of happened in previous matchups with this team. And it feels like to me, Ben Johnson and the staff is trying to get that mentality out of their heads, at least for this week going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and Brendan, I mean, you tweeted out something today about Caleb's demeanor and how that's changed over the course of the season. Like, it sounds like there was some change today. I didn't catch the interview, but like, what were your thoughts about what he had to say today?
I think maybe it's not just what he had to say, but it's how he said it. And I did this last week. I didn't want to tweet about it because I don't know, it didn't feel right at the time, but I went back to listen to his opening press conference at Hallis Hall when he was drafted. He comes in, he slides in, he's like, "Oh, Chicago, let's go. I'm ready. I'm excited." And it was very interesting. Like, it felt like he was like a kid. Like, I don't want to say kid, but just the excitement. But he was still confident. There was definitely some arrogance there, some cockiness, but it wasn't like a bad thing. And going from that to then this week where he's just like, just very stoic, very matter of fact. I'm built for these moments. I know we can get our teammates together. I know what I need to do. It just sounded like he maybe early on in his career and possibly like earlier this season too, he was really trying to convince himself a little bit that like, yes, I know I'm the guy. I know I can do this. And maybe, not as much belief or the results before that. But now it just feels like he's speaking very matter-of-factly about this team and what he believes, how he's just so confident and calm and poised with what he has to do, and not afraid to kind of like say the thing, what do you want to see happen? Oh, I want to see balls not hit the ground or something like that. I want to see receivers catch balls. Like, that's kind of that's a ballsy thing to say. But when you are the leader of the team and you've been putting together stretches like he has, I think you have the right to say that because you're also taking accountability with what you want to do. I don't know. I think just go back and listen to just a random press conference from earlier this year or late last year and listen to the last few, I would say like 2 to 3 from this year. And you're going to hear just a very different quarterback who it just feels like he's matured and he believes in what he's doing now. He's not trying to convince himself that he can do it.
Does he sound more like Ben Johnson to you? With his demeanor?
Kinda.
Yeah, right? A little bit.
That's a good note. Mm-hmm.
That is a good note. You know that they talk often and that he's in his ear all the time. So it would only make sense that he rubs off on him a little. Now, Brendan, you said early in his career, like right after the draft, Caleb slid in there. I think he sashayed in there. But
I'm not. No, don't do that.
I
don't want no part of that.
Thing. I'm always going to bring that up. But man, let's see. So the Bears have not really had Rome for either of their games, right? Against the Packers, or what? Did he play in the first one?
No.
No.
Both Packers games actually. Those were the first games that Kyler Gordon and Rome missed.
Okay. So those are two big additions back. I mean, what are your guys' expectations, starting with Samir this time, for what the Bears might be able to see from Rome and Kyler Gordon?
So it sounds great, and I'm excited to get them back into the fold. But let's caution everybody on game shape versus we've just been activated from the IR, right? We've seen Jalen Johnson here. It's taken him a little bit. He seems a little slower. He was never really a burner to begin with, but he seems a little step slower. He's working back his way up into game shape. It takes a little bit. I think Austin Booker was activated from the IR, and they didn't even play him, for a little bit to get him ready and get him up to game shape. Now, the Bears don't really have a choice. I think, and I don't know the severity of anybody's injury, right? But the way they've handled this in the past, if this wasn't a playoff game, I feel like they probably would have sat Kyler or let him practice for 2 weeks straight without re-aggravation before putting him back into the game. So I mean, honestly, I'm hoping he's 80% Kyler Gordon that we're used to, because honestly, any little bit helps, especially against this Packers team that is just speed, speed, speed. Now the weather may help the Bears a little bit with that, and we might get into that a little bit later. But I think having Rome back is also huge, because he's a big body receiver, and he could take advantage of this suspect secondary, right? Nixon, Melton, these guys, they can be had. And I think Rome and Caleb's rapport was really starting to bud a little bit before that injury happened. So I am excited to see. I don't think his injury is probably as severe as Kyler's was, or at least, he can play. It looked like a little bit when he was injured. So I think he'll be more good to go than Kyler was. But getting those two back is obviously huge. They didn't have Edmonds for the first game. They had him for the second game, and he actually, played and was impactful, I thought, in that game. So to have kind of like full strength defense here, I'm excited to see what that looks like. And I think they're going to need everybody, obviously all hands on deck on that side of the ball.
Yeah, Brendan, what are your thoughts on the guys they have returning?
Well, I'll start with Rome. I'm with Samir when it comes to the likelihood that he makes more of an impact, because I believe Rome is, I would put it as 95% that he's going to play. Caleb kind of let it slip in his press conference too, that he's pretty much going to be good to go on Saturday. Kyler, he still does have to get activated. And I know Ben Johnson said the hope that he's going to play Saturday. Plus coming off his third injury of the year now, just all happening in practice, by the way. That's still sort of an unknown if he's actually going to play. But with Rome, I'm really excited to see how this works out, because something I noticed that when Caleb had Rome for the most part of the offense, it felt like he was a crutch. Like he was peppering him with balls more often than not. And maybe there is chemistry there, but also there were some issues where either Rome was dropping balls, or the route wasn't right, or he couldn't keep his foot in bounds, or Caleb had an inaccurate pass, whatever. And when Rome went out, I think that forced Caleb to get a little more comfortable with the rest of his receivers, because then you started to see Luther Burden emerge more, and Loveland's been really going off over the last few weeks. I mean, DJ had a bit of a resurgence for a few weeks there from the Browns in the second Packers game. Ja'Day Walker as well when he got into the action. So I think that's actually helped Caleb in a way to get more comfortable throwing to the rest of his guys. And now that he's got Rome back, he doesn't necessarily need to rely on him as much. So he may not get the same like 9-10 targets that he was in certain weeks, but he's still going to be a different threat. The Bears don't have another receiver like him. I mean, you'd have to go to Loveland to really find a similar guy who's like bigger, taller, can be a mismatch like that. So I'm excited to see how he works in on the outside and brings a different element against these Packers corners, whom the Bears have torched, at different times, maybe not consistently. But then with Kyler Gordon, yeah, assuming he plays, I'm going to be very interested to see how much they lean on him, what his snap count's going to be. We don't exactly know how serious the groin injury was. Like, what was this a little more precautious? Like, hey, we're going to put you on IR and hope that maybe this is like a 2-week injury, but we're going to make sure you're good in 4 weeks when we need you the most. But assuming CJ Gardner-Johnson doesn't play, who's dealing with a concussion, you need Kyler Gordon in that nickel spot, because we know how bad the Packers wide receivers have burned that position in the past. So he's an interesting chess piece. He's always going to be an interesting chess piece. If he's, I would say like 80%, I could definitely see Dennis Allen utilizing him in so many different ways. But yeah, it's just kind of an unknown on how much he's going to be an impact and just where he's going to play, and whether he's just going to drop into coverage or if they're going to utilize him coming off the line, different blitz packages. That's probably the biggest unknown of the week for me.
Yeah, I mean, I have to think, even if it's pretty simple for him just in coverage, like the way that CJ has looked the last couple games, ultimately, I mean, I think CJ Gardner-Johnson is a really good football player. I think he's a really good safety. I'm not sure he's a great full-time nickel. And like just getting a full-time nickel in that nickel spot, I think can be very helpful. Obviously, that's all very speculative with what you're actually getting from Kyler Gordon, who has played, 1 game this year? Is that right? 3. Oh, That was 3, Brendan?
Yeah, 3.
Okay. I for a second I thought it was 0. I was like,
Oh, my bad.
I was like, did I mess? Okay. He's played 3 games this year. Like it's, I don't know, especially on what might be a wet field, like could pretty easily re-aggravate a groin injury. It's going to be interesting to see how that all goes because especially with CJ and the concussion protocol now, like if he's not good to go, now you're talking about Nick McLeod in the nickel. That gets iffy. But with Rome, I mean, I don't know. I believe Rome said something yesterday or today where he was like, if it was a more important game, he would have played week 18 too. So like, I feel like he's probably about as good as he's gonna be at least to go. And like, hopefully that's a big boost because frankly, he hadn't been the same since he first injured that foot. Like you can look at the difference in his numbers after the injury. It's like, okay, this is not the same player as it was. And I just feel like he's one of the guys who can really make these Green Bay corners pay because the Green Bay corners are they're the weakness of that defense in my mind.
Oh,
But
hold on. They got Trevon Diggs now. You're talking about an all-pro guy here.
Talking about an all-pro guy who
Rome already cooked him. Rome already cooked him in week 3?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Hey, no disrespect to Trevon Diggs. I think he's a good corner. When he got that all-pro, it was like, okay, so we're just basing this on interceptions then? Because he gave up a ton of yards.
He's Nahshon Wright with a better name, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But man, did you guys realize Nahshon Wright was like a 3rd-round draft pick?
I did
hear that.
Learn that earlier in the year. Yeah.
Yeah, I just learned that like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that because that's not that much later than when Trevon Diggs was picked. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and change up our segments this week with this one. So we're gonna start off with we're talking about instead of baddest man, nicest man, we're looking for an unsung hero because we've already talked baddest man, nicest man about these teams twice. So we're going to look for an unsung hero for the Bears in this game. And I'm going to toss this one to Brendan first. Who is your unsung hero for the Bears?
I think this is kind of general, but I think it's very noticeable coming off last game. I'm going to go Ozzie Trapillo. I think we're sort of taking his development for granted a little bit because of what happened last week when Trapillo had to miss. Who knows how injured he really is? Maybe it was just, again, another precaution to make sure he's fully healthy with that leg injury. But he was out on Sunday. The Bears started Theo Benedette at left tackle. And I think everyone was like, okay, well, that's worked in the past for the most part. And let's see how that goes. And it was a significant downgrade. I was shocked. I knew that Ozzie was playing better, but I just, maybe it's because it's been a few weeks, but I was just very surprised that Theo struggled as much as he did against the Lions defensive line that has some players for sure, but I wouldn't necessarily categorize them as like one of the best defensive lines that, the Bears have faced this year. So I'm just going to say that Ozzie Trapillo has definitely, I think everyone's appreciative of what he's done in his development, but just seeing how bad it was, he's definitely an unsung hero for the offensive line because prior to him getting hurt, I thought this was notable that the Bears went 2 weeks in a row without allowing a sack. And I know one of those teams was against the San Francisco 49ers. They're not good at getting sacks. And then the other one was the Micah Parsons-less Packers. But that's a feat the Bears hadn't accomplished since 2005, going back and having 2 games without giving up a sack. So I just think we should give Ozzie Trapillo his flowers. The offensive line definitely seems to operate much better with him at left tackle, and hopefully he's good to go because I think he was limited again this on Tuesday during the estimated walkthrough practice.
Yeah, that bruise on the back of his leg looked pretty rough to me. So I'm not sure what that means. I'm not a doctor, but I don't know. Like a part of me thinks like that might be a full muscle tear across the hamstring, and that's like, I don't know if that, or maybe it's just like a bad bone bruise, and maybe that's something he can play on. I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not sure. But one thing I know is that the difference between him and Benedict is noticeable. Like they grade fairly similarly for me, but it's for very different reasons. Like when Theo loses, it's bad. When Ozzy loses, it tends to be slower. It tends to be like less like outright loss, more like he lost, but he did just enough. When Theo wins, he wins big. Like he wrecks guys when he wins. So it's like he has a lot of bad reps and like enough dominant reps to offset that to a similar grade to what Ozzy's offering you. But Ozzy just doesn't win that much. So like their grades end up fairly even because Ozzy doesn't really win, but his losses are more manageable than Theo's. Theo loses big and wins big enough where it's like their grades are very similar. But to me, I want the guy who doesn't lose bad in that situation. I'll give some of those wins away. Like I think Theo's better for the run game, frankly, but I don't know if that's really what you care more about at this point. And that's gets into a whole different theoretical question of how much do you value run blocking over pass blocking. But I think Theo is Ozzy is just the more stable, reliable player. And Ron's in the comments saying here, a Theo loss is bad. And it's like, well, an Ozzy loss is meh bad. It's a good way to put it. Good, simple way to put it. But Samir, where are you going for your unsung hero in this one?
So I love the Ozzy pick. I was actually going to go with Ozzy. So me and Brendan on the same page again, just because of all the reasons that you labeled. I was thinking Jade Walker. I feel like I've been really impressed with what he's been doing this year. Now, will he take a back seat with, Luther back, Rome, we talked about, could be back. DJ still in the fold. Colson is emerging. I'm going to go on the other side of the ball. I'm going to go with Austin Booker. I feel like he is kind of that spark on the defense. Really the player that you notice the most on that line, to be honest, whether he is removing Packer quarterbacks from the game or batting balls at the line of scrimmage. I feel like and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I feel like he's been batting a lot of balls down. I don't know. He's got a pretty good vertical, it looks like, but I think the defensive line goes as he goes, right? If he's having a great game and he's chirping and making high energy plays, that the rest of that line seems to feed off of that. And I think it really gets Sweat going as well. So I think my unsung hero is Austin Booker. He was the lone bright spot, I thought, on defense against the Lions last week. Making kind of some plays here and there, but I think Booker, the Green Bay offensive line, I think can be had. And I think if we're gonna get like a guy that's be like on defense and be like, you know what, that guy turned the tide and really ramped it up on defense, I feel like it would be Austin Booker.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Pro Football Reference has him at 3 passes defensed and then 2 batted passes.
Okay,
I feel like that's low.
I feel like those numbers always end up low. Like no matter where you look, it never seems to record them all accurately. It's very conservative with them, I guess, or I'm not sure why they would be, but they are. And that's a staple of the Dennis Allen defense. He runs a lot of stunts. A lot of his stunts are geared to get one guy a free run, and the other guys, he's like, occupy your blocker and take away passing windows. Like, and that's what they try to do. They try pretty aggressively to do that. It's a part of the reason why their pressure numbers suck, frankly, because they don't have someone who can, like, a lot of these stunts are designed to get a free run or one-on-ones for guys, and not enough guys are winning their one-on-ones when they get them. But the other guys, a big part of the thing is just get your hands up in the passing lane, take away the passing windows, because that's just as good as having a guy covered. If you jump up when a quarterback is getting ready to throw, and take away that window, that's just as good as the guy being covered, right? Like, because he couldn't throw it. So I think that's a good pick there. For me, I mean, a part of me wants to go Jonah Jackson because I feel like he has been kind of the more overlooked guy on this O-line this year, but he also just got, Brendan Thorne and Duke Manyweather on their podcast just gave him their first team All-Pro for right guard. So I'm like, is that really unsung? I'm going a different one. This one's probably a little more controversial. And I was just debating with someone on Twitter about this earlier today. I'm going to go with Javon Dexter for this game. Last game against the Packers, he had one of his best games of the season. He was stealing Anthony Belton's lunch money. He got 3 pressures and a QB hit in there, and he had I've talked with Ron about this in private some. People rely too much on PFF for run defense grades. They just do. When I watch the Bears defensive line, I see Gervon Dexter more often than not is a very hard man to move. Even against double teams, he has gotten so much better this year at taking them on. And the Bears are the number 1 defense in the NFL against interior runs by EPA per play. And Gervon Dexter is their best interior run defender. Billings is hit or miss. Billings is very high variance. Like, he has some awesome plays, and then he has some really bad plays because he's playing too heavy. Like, no one's meant to play at the weight he's at right now, but that's what the Bears defense want him to do. But I think Dexter is their best run defender by a pretty clear margin. And I don't think he gets any of the credit he deserves for it because it just has this stuck in their mind that he's a bad run defender. And his PFF grade says he's still a bad run defender. It says he's having the worst run defense year of his career, which makes me think PFF grades are much more based on splash plays than down to down sustenance and keeping linebackers clean and holding against double teams. And because Dexter, don't get me wrong, he's still not like a monster at taking on double teams, but he holds his ground better than most defensive tackles I've seen. So he's in the average to slightly above average range there to me. I don't think he's gotten much due for his run defense this year, and I think he's a part of what has kept it from completely spiraling out of control on the run defense.
I think he did get a sack last week too, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He had a good game last week too.
Yeah.
I thought he played very well I just watched that tape today, and like his PFF grades were awful. But I got 2 QB hits, got 3 pressures, and again, I thought that he held up against the run game with really good stoutness, and that's probably where his PFF grade suffers because he doesn't make a lot of tackles at the line of scrimmage or the backfield, but he. Against zone runs, he takes away run lanes and forces guys into linebackers, into action. And I don't think PFF gives enough credit for that in their grading because he takes away options from the running back pretty consistently. But we'll go ahead and move this on to another segment here. And this one, I'm gonna start with Samir. And we're talking about the players under the most pressure. And Samir, I know you said you had a Packers player and a Bears player for this. So let's start with the Packers player.
All right. Well, I'm going to go with Jordan Love. I don't think that's really too far of a stretch to say Jordan Love is I think the player under the most pressure in this game. Both sides, right? This guy just got paid, right? Paid to be the guy. And now your best defender is out. And now everybody's basically saying this team is no longer a Super Bowl contender, even though they were calling you borderline Super Bowl contender before you got Micah Parsons. So, this team still, I know they've got Tucker Kraft is gone, but dude, you're the guy, right? And you're about to go play a playoff game against your division rival on the road to prove that you're the guy. And on top of that, your backup quarterback has come in and played really well in these short spurts. Almost beat, the Bears last time, if not for a fumbled snap. You don't know what could have happened there. So I think Jordan Love is under a lot of pressure to perform in this game. I'd say probably the player under the most pressure out of both teams.
Brendan, did you want to add a Packer, or I can go ahead if you weren't prepared for that?
No, I was gonna say Jordan Love. Samir's totally right with everything he said, and I'll also say he hasn't played in 3 weeks too. Like, I know last week, this is another thing. We'll get to this later, but just resting all the starters, and your guys already missed 2.5 games. Now you're bringing him back in a playoff pressured game, and yeah, I think there's definitely going to be questions. There's the phone lines for the Packers post-game radio shows are going to be lighting up if he struggles, the Bears win, and then you have a decision to make on Malik Willis. There's no player under the microscope more than Jordan Love in this game on both sides of the ball. And I mean, I think Packers fans would totally agree because he's been the starter now for 3 years. He does have a playoff win, but he didn't live up to expectations last year against the Eagles. He had that horrific pick. Oh my God, against the 49ers 2 years ago. Nobody's saying he's not a good quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but you start to wonder about, as Ron said, Toyotathon has ended as of Monday. So that could be an issue. So I think you're spot on, Samir. It's totally Jordan Love.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go ahead. Well, first of all, I got a question for you guys. If Jordan Love plays badly, who gets more heat, him or Matt LaFleur?
That's a good question. I think Matt LaFleur.
Samir?
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. It might not be fair, but Matt LaFleur is the guy that's easier to move off of because of,
and Ron says, see all of the above. And Samir, you echoed what I was about to say. I think Matt LaFleur is going to get more heat because he's the guy they can move off of.
Exactly.
So like fans will reason it as to like LaFleur's the problem. It's never Justin Fields. It's always the guy around Justin Fields. Like
Twitter Civil War.
But anyways, for mine, I'm gonna go a different route here. And like I said, I think Love is the right answer. But just to throw a different hat in the ring, I'm gonna go with a guy who, really wants to keep making $15 million a year. That's Trevon Diggs. Packers picked him up on waivers. He has his contract from the Cowboys still. There's no guaranteed money. Like they can drop him, no dead cap. They have no if he gives them a reason to keep paying him that much, he will continue to make that much. If he doesn't, they will drop him, maybe bring him back on a much, much lower salary. But to me, there's a ton of pressure on him to go out there and perform and make plays because he wants to keep making that payday.
I did think about Diggs too. I wasn't sure. The only reason I sort of waver on that is because it is just one game. He just got picked up. Right. I know it's not like a quarterback learning a new offensive system or anything like that, but it's like you could almost excuse the fact like, okay, it was a bad game or things went wrong because you just got here like a week ago. Feels like the Packers were just throwing a Hail Mary like, the Colts were with Phillip Rivers, just seeing what would stick.
I think if you're on that side of the ball, you could probably talk yourself into Rashawn Gary as well, right?
That was I was just gonna say that as well, Samir. Like that was the third person I was kind of thinking of during this exercise. But it feels like the writing's already on the wall for him because he was effectively benched against the Ravens, and I don't know if he could do anything for the Packers to say, yeah, maybe we'll keep him in his extraordinarily expensive contract.
Yeah.
All right, so for the Bears, tossing this one to Brendan first. Who's under the most pressure on the Bears this week?
There's a few names. There's definitely a few names here. I'm gonna go with Jalen Johnson. Bad game from him against the Lions, and just not only in coverage but also just some willingness to tackle and lay your body on the line to make some big plays. Kind of another situation. Like, I don't know if it's a guarantee that Jalen Johnson is on this team next year either. And he is your former second all-pro team cornerback, former Pro Bowler, the guy that you count on to shut down guys. And the first Packers game he came back, or I think it was the second game he was back, he was kind of rotating still. He was, as he was getting his legs under him. I know he's not, 100% yet. I don't know if he's going to be 100% for the rest of the season. This could be like an off-season thing for him to get better, but he has got to show more going into the offseason, whether this is his last game or there's one more game after this, because of how bad the secondary has been over the last few weeks and for what this could mean for his Bears future as well, because the Bears, there's an opportunity for the Bears to move off him next year. And I just don't think anything's guaranteed with this defense. We need to see Jalen Johnson be that shutdown guy and be able to lock up some of these Packers receivers who, for the most part, don't necessarily scare anyone, outside of Christian Watson. So I'm definitely looking to him to step up his game and be the shutdown guy that the Bears paid him to be a couple years ago.
Yeah, in 2 games against the Packers this year, 3 targets, 3 catches, 37 yards. So not bad. It's been interesting to me. Like the San Fran game, he got targeted once and didn't allow a catch, right? Like, so there's still an element of, until last week against Detroit, offense is largely just avoiding his side of the field. Because he really hasn't seen that many targets since he's gotten back. Teams really haven't tested him that heavily until that Detroit game when they tested him over and over and over, which is interesting. And you say maybe like there is a chance he's not on this team next year, and that's, I don't know, I end up in gray area with that because I'm like, yes, I see that, but also a 26-year-old former All-Pro cornerback, like, I'm also sitting here going, unless it's in a trade for Max Crosby, I'm like, don't get rid of that dude, you know?
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen. I just think it could be on the table with what transpires. I think this offseason is going to be very interesting with potential moves and who's going to come back, who's not. And I just wouldn't say he's guaranteed to be. There's no untouchables on this defense.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, and that pressure on him does matter in this one, because it's like that's the difference between, you know, maybe if he plays poorly, he's either here under this contract with the time ticking for him to like want an extension. He has a prove it year essentially, versus going into a prove it year, because it's probably a prove it year no matter what, but going into a prove it year off of good games versus bad games are very different things. Because when you're a 26, 27-year-old corner, you want one more payday before you're 30. Right. Like that's the entire reason his contract was structured with the number of years it was, so he can get paid again before he's 30. That pressure aspect, I think that's a good pick. Now, Samir, where are you going? What Bear has the most pressure on them this week?
So I was looking at the secondary as well, because they're an easy target coming off a last game. You know, Brisker comes to mind just because he's playing for a contract and he struggled a little bit. In the first game for sure. Second game he was just kind of there, but I'm gonna go with somebody that was mentioned in the comments here, Montez Sweat, the guy that we are paying a lot of money to get to the quarterback, and we talked about this ad nauseum, right? The first 2 times we did the preview for the Packers game, you cannot blitz Jordan Love. You have to get home with 4, or he's going to carve you up. He's excellent against the blitz. And they just haven't been able to do that. Now, do I think they're magically going to figure out how to get pressure with 4 in a playoff game? That, you know, you're drinking the tea a little bit, but he needs to have a big game. At least make him uncomfortable. You know, you're the guy, right? I know we talked about Austin Booker as the unsung hero. Montez Sweat needs to be the sung hero. You know, he needs to be the guy that we know is going to put the cape on and make Jordan Love's life hell. And I think he can do it. That Packers offensive line isn't great. I think they got Zach Tom back, is what you were saying in the pregame show there. Still, I think he's got the tools to be a game wrecker, and this is the time to show it. You know, is this his first playoff game? I'm not sure if it is or not, but you know, it's time to light it up on the big stage.
It's his second playoff game.
It is his second. Yeah, I was just looking that up because I couldn't remember if he played in 2020 when Washington went in. He had a really good game against Tampa Bay and Tom Brady in that 2021 wildcard game. He had 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 QB hits.
Oh, great. Let's sign up for that. I'll take that.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, against Tom Brady, Tom Brady doesn't take a lot of sacks and doesn't take a lot of hits. That's actually really impressive. And against Zach Tom, like I'm glad you went with Sweat there, because I wanted to talk about that. Like, he is going against one of the better off right tackles in the league in this game now, because Zach Tom is back. I do think Tom has some weaknesses with long arm guys like him, but that's all the more reason why he should be able to show his value in this game in my mind, because that is his weakness, but also it is a very good offensive tackle. So that's an interesting one to watch. For me, I'm going with Tremaine Edmonds. This is a contract game for Tremaine Edmonds, because I do not think he is back in Chicago under this contract next year. maybe he's back under a restructured deal, but more likely than that, I think he's playing for another team. There's they can walk away from his deal with very little dead money after this season. And there's a big question of like, how can that money be allocated better? How do the Bears feel about their linebacker room here? I think that Tremaine Edmonds is firmly on the chopping block this offseason, and a big game here goes a long way towards either keeping him around or his value on the open market. Because again, he is not an older guy. He's what?
He's still like 27.
Yeah, he
28?
can't be all that old. Yeah, he's 27 right now. So like, again, he's a guy who's up for another contract here very soon and might be a free agent this offseason. So his ability to show out in playoff games will turn around his value faster than anything possible. So tons of pressure on him in this game, in my opinion. But let's move on to another segment here. Now, this one, you got to start the sentence. The Bears will win if. And then you finish the sentence. Tossing it to Samir first on this one.
All right. So I think the Bears will win if they score first and keep the time of possession close. That's how I feel like the last couple games they've been playing a little bit from behind. Now the San Fran game, they had the pick six, so they did score first technically, but I'm talking specifically the offense. Like Brendan had mentioned, start fast. I think that when they score first, they have such a different mindset and they're playing a little more comfortably, and it doesn't put so much pressure on that defense to try and, make a play, get off the field. We saw it in the Detroit game. They had one possession in the first quarter. I think they only had 3 or 4 in the first half, something like that. It's not enough time for them to get into a rhythm. So I think they need to score first. And I think they don't have to win the time of possession, but it can't be like 20 minutes to 4 minutes or something crazy like we've seen in the past.
Brendan, what do you got?
The Bears will win if their defense continues to bend and not break at Soldier Field. It's funny, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this on other shows, but just the discourse about seeding and playing for nothing, and what seeding doesn't matter in the playoffs by certain people is a load of shit. The Bears' home field is so critical to what they need to do to win. Do you guys know how many touchdowns the Bears have let up at Soldier Field in their last 3 games?
No.
2.
1, 2.
2 touchdowns by their defense. For as bad as everything has been and maybe appears on the surface, just 2 touchdowns in 3 games. They performed extremely well the last time the Packers came to Soldier Field when it came to red zone defense, and that allowed the Bears offense to stay in the game and finally hit their groove. I know a few other things needed to happen. I understand that, but I think the Bears will win if they continue to keep the Packers out of the end zone and settle for field goals. I just think that this offense is good enough to put points up quickly. Caleb has absolutely been hitting his stride over the last few weeks. Kind of goes to what Samir was saying, like scoring first and getting out to that early lead. But the defense needs to, I understand giving up yards is never good. Giving up points is never good. But just keeping the Packers out of the end zone and limiting them to maybe like 1 touchdown this game, kind of like what they've been doing the last few weeks, that's going to lead them to victory because the offense is good enough to carry them the rest of the way.
Okay, that's a good one. Now, I'm going to go with the Bears will win if they hold the Green Bay rushing offense at or below 115 rush yards. Now, this is I'm putting a hard number on there because I have to. Like, when they've gone over 115 rush yards, the Packers are 6-2-1. When they are held at or below 115, they're 3-5. And I've always, this one really comes down to, I've always felt like the Matt LaFleur offense works and doesn't work with the rushing offense. when he can start forcing extra defenders in the box, that's where he can really kill you. And that's something that the Bears have, in my opinion, in their 2 games against them, done a pretty good job of against the Packers, is limiting them. They held them to 117 at Lambeau, and they gave up more they gave up a ton in the second game at Soldier Field, but a lot of that was Malik Willis. That gets a little different. I'm more talking like the running back rush yards, because their entire offense just became rushing once Malik Willis entered the game, and the read option stuff, which I don't expect, it just throws your game plan out the window. But I see the main key to beating Matt LaFleur almost always as being, you got to limit their running backs without adding bodies in the box. And I think that is the number one thing for the Bears to do to win this game.
Do we know how Josh Jacobs is doing? I know they said, I saw the quote that said he's in great spirits. I'm like, well, what the hell does that mean? Like,
that means he's not doing great.
That means
that's my thought, at least.
He's drank a lot of great spirits over the holiday weekend.
Means he's gonna play, and we'll see.
Sounds like he's in the hospital. Like, he's hospitalized, but he's in great spirits.
I looked at, they rested all their guys, right? I know they were nicked up a little bit on both sides of the ball. They'll be coming in a little less, banged up than they would have off of a normal game. So I think that does help older players like Jacobs. Work through that.
Yeah, he really hasn't. Most of this season, it feels like he's been banged up and just hasn't been putting together the same like explosives that you'd typically see from him. But yeah, but the last time around, the Bears allowed a lot of yards to Emmanuel Wilson.
That's what I was going to say. Wilson kind of carved us up a little bit last time as well.
Yeah. So that's going to be a big spot that I'm looking for, is being able to, specifically, I mentioned earlier, the Bears having the number 1 rush defense in between the tackles. They're like bottom 3 in the NFL run defense outside the tackles. So that's linebackers, that's corners, being in the run support, being in the run fit. I think that's going to matter a lot in this game, because I think that they will try to carve them up there.
Isn't that the speed thing that you and Ron were talking about? The Bears just don't have like lateral speed, and then they take bad angles, and that could lead to some of those outside runs kind of getting to that second level.
With the D line, definitely. I think it probably does impact the corners and like TJ Edwards as well. Definitely, like some of the TJ Edwards angles this year have been pretty rough. But Edmonds he is fast. There's no reason Edmonds can't be good in that department.
Yeah.
Nashawn Wright has been like, I don't know, he's been a pretty rough run defender this year, but then there are moments where it's like, oh, okay, that length is really playing up for you. So you need a big game from him if he's out there. Maybe Tyreek Stevenson's out there. I think Tyreek Stevenson's probably one of the better run support corners in the league. Honestly, it's not something that is a very like super valuable trait, but it's something that he's good at. It's why one of the reasons Eberflus loved him, I think, in the draft. But it's going to be. I think that's going to be a big point in this game. Now we're going to get to our final segment here, and it's called Good, Better, Best. So good is a player who's going to score a touchdown. Better is a player who's going to lead the Bears in touches or targets, something. It doesn't have to be like exactly, but a guy who's just going to be very key to the game plan within the Bears offense. And best is your final score prediction. I'll give it to Samir first.
All right. So my good, I'm going to go with Rome. Rome gets welcomed back with a touchdown. His buddy Caleb looks for him specifically. So I would bet an anytime touchdown for Rome. For my better, I'm going to go with DeAndre Swift leading the Bears in all-purpose yards. I think it's going to be kind of an ugly kind of slugfest type of game. It's supposed to be rainy and maybe a little sleety, and I don't know how much it's going to be windy. I don't know how much, they're really going to air it out downfield. So I do expect a heavy dose of Swift. I think Ben trusts him a lot. This kind of game you think Monangai because he's just big, physical, that type of back. But I do think Ben Johnson has an enormous amount of trust in DeAndre Swift and will look for a veteran, especially in the playoffs. So I would look for Swift to lead the Bears in all-purpose yards, both rushing and receiving combined. And then best, my score prediction, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be close because they're all close. I'm going to go Packers 20, Bears 21. Bears get the edge here by a point.
By a point. Brendan, what
I
do you
have
got for
one.
your good, better, best?
I was just looking to see a stat because I wanted to make sure I was right. Okay. Well, once again, Samir took what I was going to say, so screw you. We're just sharing the same brain as always. I was going to say Rome because I think there have been quite a few red zone opportunities when he's been in the lineup, and I think Caleb trusts him there, even though he hasn't played in a few weeks. But I'm going to shift, and I'm going to go to Kyle Monangai. I totally understand what Samir's saying about kind of trusting DeAndre Swift a little bit more. And you can see that with how the carries have shifted back towards him more so than Monangai. I mean, he still gets his carries, obviously. But I think in certain situations, when you get down near the goal line within the 5-yard line, I think they're just going to pound the rock up the middle as much as possible. Monangai's finally going to get his first touchdown since the Philly game. Which is crazy. It's been how many weeks? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 weeks since a touchdown. That's been way too long. I just feel like he's going to be due at this point. There's going to be certain instances where the Bears aren't going to take chances and just, run it again, run it a third time to make sure they get the ball in the end zone. Leading touches. This is Colston Loveland. I think Colston Loveland has become a player now where at first, maybe you could say, oh, this is a good matchup for tight ends and the linebackers and corners can't cover him and on certain teams and he should feast. He's matchup proof at this point. He's just going to get targeted. He has elevated himself to be one of the trusted targets of the offense, and Caleb Williams specifically. He had half of the targets last week. I mean, it just looking at the target share between him and then all the other receivers and tight ends, it was insane. I mean, you don't even have to look at the stats. You saw just every other pass was going his way. I just think the trust there is so good. He has elevated his game so much. And even in the last matchup against the Packers, the offense didn't get going until the tight ends started to get more involved. So I think Ben Johnson's going to utilize that, remember that from last time, and make sure that these guys get more targets early and often instead of maybe waiting until later in the game. So I think Colston Loveland is going to lead the Bears once again in receiving yards, probably targets and receptions as well. And then my final score, this is a really close game. I cannot pick the Bears to lose this. I just can't. I can't live with myself if I pick the Bears to lose to the Packers in the playoffs. I'll go down fighting, go down swinging, all of that. I'm going to say the Bears win 21-17. And I think part of this is, one, I think Ben has, as I talked about earlier, I think he's learned from the last few matchups that he's not making this bigger than it needs to be. The coaches, I think they match up very well against one another. It's all about who is just really going to make the most with their last strike. And I think that's going to be the Bears this time, like they did the last time at Soldier Field. And also, maybe this doesn't play into anything, but I believe it does. Matt LaFleur is very streaky going into the playoffs. And I tweeted this over the weekend that ever since he became the Packers head coach in 2019, their week 17 or 18, the regular season finale, has dictated what they do in the playoffs. If they lose, they lose in the playoffs. If they win at least one playoff game. And I think that's notable because it feels like just certain coaches, that's kind of, they're streaky going into that, postseason. The Packers have lost 4 straight. I understand they sat everybody, but it just feels like they're limping in and the confidence is at an all-time low. It kind of feels like both fan bases, to be honest, guys, are kind of like not, shit talking one another as much as usual because I think both people are kind of scared. I just feel like Matt LaFleur, being a streaky coach like that, like he is, I just don't know if he can turn that switch on like other Packers teams have been able to do. They've relied on momentum going into the playoffs.
I think that's a really good point. Really interesting. For me, for my good player to catch a touchdown, big time players make big time plays in big moments. This is Darnell Wright's week. Darnell Wright touchdown. Book it. For better player to lead in touches or targets, I think it's a Kyle Monangai game. I think it's going to be rough weather out there. I think he's going to get a lot of run between the tackles where The Packers have some softness up the middle, which we've noted, in both times previously, and both times it didn't seem to actually play to the Bears' favor. But I expect them to find those answers because those defensive tackles are small. Give me Colin Munungai for better, and for best score prediction, give me the Bears 24, the Packers 21 in a nail biter of a game. Probably another ugly football game, but Bears coming out on top. Gentlemen, why don't we give a good old bear down here? Or actually, before we do that, Brendan, I've been forgetting the last few shows to do this. Let everyone know where they can find your work in case they're not aware of it already.
Oh, thank you. You can follow me on Twitter or X at Brendan Sugrue. That's Sugrue. Make sure you check out my work at bearswire.com. And then I'm also on Blue Sky, but I don't post as much there, so sorry. But yeah, hopefully this isn't the last time I'm on with you guys this season. Let's keep this going. This will not be the last preview show.
Yes, I like that.
Will not. And you can find Samir and I's work over at ontapsportsnet.com. You can find me on Twitter at BuckHisStats and Samir on Twitter at SMPatel06. Gentlemen, why don't we give a bear down and we'll get out of here.
Bear down. Get those cheese graters out.
Bear down. We will see you next week.
Bear down.
Like it.